Sarah from Lancaster, Ohio, tells Monsters Among Us the story of her childhood dog, Cricket, who, according to Sarah, was a pretty unhappy dog. She was super cranky. She only liked my grandma, Sarah says. She didn't seem like she felt well. Still, the family loved their dog and was devastated when the pup ran out into the road and was struck and killed by a passing car as they were preparing to leave on a family vacation. It was very sad, very upsetting, especially with me being a child. My grandmother was there. She loved Cricket and Cricket loved her. They had this special relationship that none of us had. Despite the loss, the family had prepaid for their vacation and, not having a lot of money, decided to still go, leaving Cricket's body with an aunt who offered to take of the necessary details. Upon arriving at the hotel where they were staying, Sarah says the family was upset over the tragedy. We go to bed, and in the middle of the night, I'm not sure why I woke up, but I startled, woke up, sat up in bed, and looked down, and on the floor was Cricket, a full-body apparition of her, says Sarah. She looked so happy. She looked like a different dog. She was jumping around. All that crankiness, all that unhappiness she had was gone. It was like she was coming to tell me that she was okay. It was the clearest apparition. I've never seen an apparition again. It was the first and only time. Sarah says she told her mother in the morning what she'd seen, and her mum dismissed it as her middle school brain just trying to make sense of the loss. I guess that's possible, says Sarah, but to this day, I can still envision Cricket in that moment. I've never forgotten that image, and it helped me feel better about what had happened, because she seemed so happy, and I do think she was visiting me that night. Built in the late 1800s, the Willoughby Coal building in Willoughby, Ohio, housed a variety of businesses in its time, including a train depot, cheese factory, and flour mill. In 1912, it became the very prosperous Willoughby Coal, supplying coal to local residents before it was sold to Henry Windus and William Don Norris in the 1930s. Over time, the relationship between the two owners grew contentious, according to Teresa Argy. Henry Windus wanted to buy the business from Don Norris, but Don was unwilling to sell, the paranormal investigator tells Today.com. One morning, Norris allegedly told his wife he was going out for bread and to check on repairs being done on the Willoughby building. He never returned. Several hours later, his body was discovered in front of the door. He was laying in a bloody heap, Argy says. Even though his death was ultimately ruled accidental, Argy says that Norris's family believed he'd been murdered. Though no one knows what really happened that morning, Argy believes his spirit still haunts the building. We have come in contact with him on many occasions, she says, and claims that others have reported seeing faces in the window and heard unexplained footsteps and other unusual occurrences at the building. But Norris isn't alone. We've probably got 5 or 6 resident spirits in the building. Kip, a caller from New York State, talks of an old home that he and his wife purchased. Upon moving in, his wife invited her sister and newborn baby to come for a visit. They stayed in the downstairs bedroom, and my wife was sleeping in an upstairs bedroom, Kip explains on Monsters Among Us, and says the first night their guests stayed, his wife overheard her sister talking to someone in the middle of the night. The next morning, Kip's wife asked who she'd been talking to, and her sister replied, "I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was an old lady standing over my baby, and I had to tell her to get away." According to Kip, there were more unexplained incidents in the house, including mysteriously moving lamps and a creepy occurrence with a fire alarm that went off while his wife was outside working in their garden. She immediately runs back into the house, figures out that it's the smoke alarm in that same downstairs bedroom going off, Kip says on the podcast. When she opened the door, she said for a split second all she could see in the room was this white fog. Within moments, however, the white fog disappeared and the alarm shut off. Convinced the house was haunted, Kip's wife reached out to a neighbor to learn more about the property and discovered that the previous owner was a 90-year-old woman who tragically died in a house fire. "Needless to say, we fixed up the house and got out of there as fast as we could and moved someplace else," says Kip. On his way to get married, a military man and his best man set off on an 800-mile road trip from Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to Lafayette, Indiana. It was 1 a.m. on a cold January night in 2014, and the man tells Monsters Among Us that the weather was bad and temperatures were in the negative double digits. As the pair closed in on Indianapolis, they discovered they had no money to pay for gas to refuel the car and were about to run out. Growing up in the trucking industry with my dad, I decided to stop at a truck stop, the man explained. But because the main interstates were shut down due to the weather, they'd get off the highway and search for a truck stop along the back roads instead. We found a smaller truck stop. It had one truck and it was just kind of strange. It was just a blacked-out truck with a blacked-out trailer. There was no real markings on it, nothing distinguishable, he says. They went in, hoping a clerk or waitress would spot them a few dollars for gas enough to make it to Indianapolis, at which time they'd go to the bank, take out cash and pay back the loan. Inside, they found a tidy diner, occupied by a waitress, cook, and a lone truck driver. I went inside, talked to this driver, and he bought us a cup of coffee. We sat there and talked for about 30 minutes about what was going on and where we were headed, and he gave us $20 for gas. I went outside, pumped our gas, came back in, and I told him, "Hey, I really appreciate it. I'll be back." Making good on his word, the man got cash from the bank upon arriving in Indianapolis and returned to the diner. When we arrived at about 10 o'clock in the morning, it's boarded up, he says. It looked like it's been abandoned for years and the truck's gone. But we had just been in there. They pulled in anyway and found a police officer parked in the lot. They explained what happened just hours before, to which the cop chuckled and replied, "Oh, you met the ghost of 3. So 2 military members converse, had a cup of coffee with, interacted with 3 people at a diner that had a fuel pump. I got $20 worth of gas," says the man. "When I came back, it'd been boarded up for, if I remember correctly, the cop said it had been boarded up for the last 25 years. Alicia Diozzi, teacher, tour guide, and owner of Salem Kids Tours, typically sticks to talking about Salem, Massachusetts' long and diverse history. However, there's one story she likes to share about a ghost that haunts First Church in Salem. The plot twist, only children can see it. The little ones, maybe age 4 or 5, will ask about a ghostly presence that they see up in the choir loft in the main sanctuary of our church, she tells Today.com. According to Diozzi, kids often point to the same spot in the church and claim they see a woman there. The kids will say she's in a long dress, long sleeves, and that she sometimes can be heard singing with the choir, Diozzi says. Tales of the choir ghost have been circulating since the 1960s, says Diozzi, and she might have dismissed them had her own son not pointed to Loft 15 years ago and asked about the lady who sings with the choir. Was she chilled? Yes, definitely, Diozzi says. I feel like the main sanctuary at First Church has that feeling. You do kind of feel the presence of the past. It's not a bad feeling, she says, but rather a history or energy that's comforting in a way.